Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Accounting with Confidence. My name is Beth Whitworth, and I am here to work with you today on how to add an account to your chart of accounts. And we will be covering this in both the desktop and the online applications. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Beth Whitworth, and I am a CPA in St. Louis, Missouri, who's been working with QuickBooks for more than 20 years. I am a CPA firm owner and have been running my own business for 13 years, and I've been a QuickBooks Pro Advisor since the beginning of that program and have been advanced certified in both QuickBooks Desktop and QuickBooks Online for as long as that option has been available. So we are going to jump right into some product demonstrations on how to use the chart of accounts as far as adding a new account when you need one. And this has come up several times, and it will come up during the life of your product and your business, because you will need to be having things that happen. Maybe you get a loan, maybe you get a new bank account. It could be that you have expanded and want to be able to keep track of sales in a certain way. So what I'm going to do is hop into the desktop version first, and I'm going to show you exactly how to add an account to the chart of accounts in what my opinion is the correct way. So I see all kinds of issues with this where people choose the wrong a type of account, and that creates all kinds of problems where they're not seeing the information the way they want to see it. I see where people will add too much detail for an account, where they think that they need to put maybe the expense you're listing the specific vendor you're paying. You don't need that in your chart of accounts. The chart of accounts is really a grouping of the buckets that you want to see on your reports in order to quickly identify how you're spending your money on a profit and loss, or what your bank balance is. So we want to keep these general categories, and there are some that people can get very specific with this. Some people are a little more broad, but you definitely want to err on the side of being more broad than more specific, because in QuickBooks there are lots of ways to get reports of the details of your transactions without putting them onto a report like your financial statements, that most readers of financial statements do not need that much detail. So what I did is I jumped over to the QuickBooks Online, and to find your chart of accounts, it is under Lists. So you can find it here, and I believe there's also a shortcut on your menu here on your home page where you can jump right to the chart of accounts. And here you will see your list, and I'm in a sample company that is actually not using account numbers. And if you're a very small business and you might be the only one handling your bookkeeping needs, I would suggest that that is okay. You don't have to have account numbers. However, if you have other people working in your books, maybe you have somebody on your team that helps you with the accounting, maybe you have an outside service that helps you with the accounting, or if you are just one of those people that needs to have a specific number so it's easy for you to remember what account to put things to, then I would suggest that you use account numbers. Typical account numbering systems work like this. If it's an asset account, then it starts with the number 1. If it is a liability account, it starts with the number 2. If it's an equity account, it starts with the number 3. And those are your 3 basic types of accounts on your balance sheet. Then when you get over to the profit and loss side, you would have your income accounts, which start with the number 4. If you are using cost of goods sold because you're a manufacturer or a retailer and you need to keep track of purchases you've made and then resold, then the cost of goods sold account typically will start with the number 5. If you do not have cost of goods sold, then the next category, your expenses, will start with the number 5 or the number 6, and usually those end up being 6s and 7s. And then you might have an other income account, an other expense account, things that you want to list outside of the operations of the business, and those will start with 8s and 9s. So that is the typical numbering system, and I recommend in a QuickBooks file that you never need to use more than 4 or 5 digits, and most businesses can get away with 3 or 4. You need more than 2 because if you start a bank account with the number 1, the next one would be number 2. That doesn't really work. You want to start the account number with 100, and maybe the next bank account is 101, 102, and you try to keep those in order so it just makes more sense visually when you're working in the file. So here we are on the QuickBooks chart of accounts list, and to add a new account, you can jump down here to Account, New. And that brings you to the Add New Account window. And the most typical types of accounts are listed here, and if you are adding something else, you will have the opportunity to look under this Other Account Types and see the account types that QuickBooks allows you to choose from. These account types are not they are not editable. So these are hard-coded into QuickBooks, and these are your only choices. So you need to pick one, and you need to make sure that you know what you're picking. So if you're setting up a bank account, you're going to logically come right up here to Bank Account. If you're setting up a new expense account, you're going to come in here, and if you're setting up a cost of goods sold account, you need to choose cost of goods sold. And what this does is it will automatically put these in the appropriate place on your financial statements. If you chose an income account and you were really setting up a bank account, you will not be able to use the bank account in QuickBooks the way you need to use it. So be really cautious on knowing exactly what type of account you are setting up. So in this example, I'm just going to set up a new expense account. So I'm going to choose expense and click continue. So if I had account numbers turned on, there would be a box up here that you would want to put the account number in. You cannot use the same number that has already been assigned to another account. So what I generally recommend is that you look when you have account numbers turned on, they will be listed with the account name. So go find what the next available number would be before you set up the account. All right, so we're going to add an account, and this time I think we're just going to add, let's see, maybe we have some, office cleaning expense. So I'm going to make this very specific in this case, just so it stands out to us. But normally, you're going to take general office expenses and put them in an office expense account. Maybe this is something that you really, really need to see broken out, so you want to show it as office cleaning expense. The next section is relating to sub-accounts. So the general rule is if you have a broad category of accounts, like in this case, we show car, truck expense. Underneath that, this particular customer wants to keep track of his lease payments, his gas, his insurance, his mileage, registration, repairs. And that is all totally fine to do if you need that type of detail, but don't create the detail if nobody's using it. The other piece of advice relating to sub-accounts is that this account, that is the one that is before the indented numbers or indented accounts, you never post anything to this account. So a lot of times I will instruct my clients to put an asterisk or something in front of that so that you know that if it has an asterisk in front of it, you are not to post to that and you have to choose a sub-account. If you don't, you end up with an account in your reports that shows car, truck expense, other. And then you just don't know. It could be one of these sub-accounts. It could need to be something that needs to go to another sub-account, but it makes you have to look. So never post to a main account. The other most typical place I see where people are using sub-accounts is in insurance. And the third is in payroll-related expenses, so that all of those payroll costs get grouped together. So if it's something that is not going to be a sub-account of something, you are just going to leave that unchecked. And this whole section says optional. Take note, this is optional. You don't have to put a description in here. If you are a one-man shop, you're setting up an account, you don't need to define this. If you are setting this up and you want to be super clear to somebody on what types of things you want coded here, then you feel free to put in a note. The tax line mapping is really something that is, if you're preparing your own tax return, then feel free to work with that. But if you outsource that, your tax preparer may or may not use it. So if you're done setting up an account, you can hit save and close, and it will take you back to the list. So the default situation in desktop is that the account gets added to the very top of your expense categories, your types. So if you wanted to not show above advertising expense, because typically your accounts they're either in number order or they're alphabetical, if you want it to actually show where you want it, you're going to come over here to this dot, and it's going to make a crosshairs, and you're going to left click, and you're going to slide it down to where you want it. So if I'm alphabetical, it's going to be right here before office equipment, office cleaning expense. If you don't do that, then when you run your report, it's always going to show up at the top of your expenses. And what happens is people get a lot of jumbled expenses up in that area that it's not neat and clean if you're trying to keep things alphabetical. That's also why it's super important to make sure that if you are using account numbers, you're looking to see what the next available is. And when you're setting up those account numbers, you are leaving enough space for additions. So typically maybe you set up a meals and entertainment expense is account 6,500. Maybe the next account you set up, which would have been office expense, is 6,510. And that gives you, spots in between here that you can choose, make office cleaning 6,509 or whatever makes sense to you so that you can keep the things in order. So there's the desktop version of how to add an account to your chart of accounts. Again, words of caution is to make sure you understand what type of account you are choosing. These are the types, and they are hard-coded into QuickBooks. There's all the choices. You might see some things that are non-posting. These QuickBooks create automatically for things that happen behind the scenes in QuickBooks and actually do not end up posting anywhere on a financial statement. So next we're going to hop over to QuickBooks Online, and we are going to come in here and look at how to add an account in your QuickBooks Online company file. So in order to do this, you also need to navigate to the chart of accounts. So for me, I go to Accounting and slide over to Chart of Accounts. So I'm going to click See Your Chart of Accounts, and here you will see your list. So there are definitely some limitations within QuickBooks Online, and some of those limitations involve how many accounts you are allowed to have before you need to upgrade to a higher level of QuickBooks Online, and that means you can't have more than 250 accounts, and that includes your sub-accounts. So just be aware of that as you're adding accounts. So in this case, I'm going to show you what you need to do in order to add a new bank account. So here we have, again, another company. It's small enough that they are not using accounts for their chart of accounts, account numbers, excuse me. So you will want to add, you want to turn that on if you have outside people working in your file. To add a new account, you're going to come over to New. And if you click on the drop down, just so you know, you can import a list of your chart of accounts. If you had another file and you could get it into an Excel file, you should be able to import that. However, if your file is already in existence and you have accounts already set up, I don't really recommend doing that because it can really mess up the accounts as far as their ordering and having duplicates and such things. So we're going to click on New. And here we have a similar window to what you found in QuickBooks Desktop. You have your account type. That's the first thing you get to choose. And you have the same account types available as you had inside of QuickBooks Desktop. However, they're in a little bit of a different order. So just be aware of that. You've got bank account is the default one, and that's what comes up automatically. In addition to the type, QuickBooks Online requires you to choose a detail type. And so it gives you suggestions on what these detail types should be, and you need to pick one. And what this is allowing you to do is this is helping map it to things for maybe a cash flow statement or making sure it's ending up in the right place on your chart of accounts. So if we're opening up a new bank account, I'm going to choose that it was checking. When you choose this, it automatically names the account. Do not stick with this if you don't, if that doesn't make sense to you. So it looks like in the background, we can see here, we already have a checking account and a savings account. Best practices for me is to make sure that you include the bank name. So it might be checking and it might be Bank of America. And feel free to use BOA if that is something that you're familiar with and you have a shortcut to it. So you want to make sure that you're putting the bank name. I tend to put it after the main name. And this is one of those examples of an exception to using the name of a vendor, customer, or employee in your chart of accounts name. Sometimes you need to add this information, a bank information, when you're setting up a bank account or a note payable, a loan account, so you know what loan or what bank that loan is associated with. Here's your section where you can also add a sub-account. This is the same as in the desktop training, where if you are going to choose a sub-account, you need to make sure that you never post to the main account because it can start to make a mess. And then the next is, the question is, when do you want to start tracking your finances from this account in QuickBooks? And this has to do with when you are actually going to put in the opening balance. And if you're opening a new bank account, you're just going to start today. This is, and you don't need to put in any balance if it's a brand new bank account, because you're going to go and record any deposit that you put into this account separately. So we're going to say save and close. And now you can see we have the checking account, we have the checking bank account. So caveats within QuickBooks Online is there's no ability to reorder these accounts. So be extremely diligent in making sure if you are using account numbers that you are actually having the accounts in the order that you want. The other issue inside of QuickBooks Online is there is never the ability to actually delete an account if you set it up incorrectly. All you can do is inactivate it. You can make it inactive. If you make it inactive, then it reduces that usage limit that I mentioned at the beginning, where you need to have less than 250 accounts in order to stay in this lower version of QuickBooks Online and not have to pay for the higher advanced account. Other things you can do within the chart of accounts is connect your bank account to your bank's feeds so that you can get the transactions electronically. You can do this in both desktop and online. If you needed to edit, say, the bank name, you decided that you want this to say BOA instead of Bank of America because it's just taking up too much space, you can just come in here, make the change, save and close. And now we have BOA. But yeah, so just so you know, you cannot move these. In desktop, I was able to click the dot and slide it where I wanted it so that I knew it would be in the order I wanted it when I was in my reports, but it cannot do that here. All right, so that's how you set up the bank account, and that's how you set up a new account in your chart of accounts. Couple of differences between desktop and online. On online, it has the detail account that it wants you to choose, and that is this actual detail type. And you cannot reorder, and you cannot completely delete something. You can just inactivate it. Okay, so that's what we're covering today, is just how to add those accounts. The next time you have a new bank account or a new loan account, or you have a new expense account that you don't have some place to put it or got left off of your chart of accounts to begin with, you can come back to this video. You can see how to add those accounts into your QuickBooks files. So here's a couple ways to stay connected with me. Feel free to come into my Facebook page and see what content we have there. I have a website which is where this video will be living as a blog. And then you can always email me at beth@wlxco.com. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.